We are moving on with our Contenders series, and we've done loads of counties at this stage. One of the ones that's more interesting, kind of on the fringes of that contending group, is Armagh. I'm delighted to say Aidan O'Rourke is with us this morning. Aidan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads.
So, look, we've been doing a Contenders series. I don't think Armagh would consider themselves just yet to be contenders to beat Dublin, but it feels from the outside like the graph is pointing upwards and they're trending in the right direction. So, are they close to being contenders?
I don't think they'd thank you for any of that talk around team development or whatever, like, trying to keep head their light under a bushel and all of that. But signs have been very good. In fairness, the weekend was probably really an acid test for them. Monaghan have been in Division 1 for consistently and performing well there, even though they are maybe in a wee bit of transition. So measuring themselves against Monaghan in a National League Division 1 fixture was a good starting point, and they were full value for their win. So yeah, the trajectory is upward. It's quite a young team, particularly in an attacking sense, and a lot of positivity around the county after the weekend.
In terms of the evolution of the style of play and all that, look, there's the evidence of one game to draw some conclusions from, and even last year was a COVID season where no one really got a head of steam up. So I find it very difficult to tell where teams are. What are you seeing when you're doing your analysis of Armagh last season versus even the signs for this year? How are they trying to play?
Well, on the general point, it is very difficult to evolve game plan at the moment. If you look at the last 12, 14 months, really any opportunities teams have had to work on how they play have been very, very limited, and because of the nature of stop-start seasons, it's probably a case where teams are just trying to keep the show on the road and refresh memories when they get back in and get people playing to patterns that suit. So I don't think there's been a whole pile of game plan development anywhere, really. But Armagh in particular, principles have been the same for 3 or 4 years in terms of how they play. They've just gotten better and better at it. The team have got more and more cohesive. They've been supplemented by 3 or 4 really good young players almost each year, and they're at a stage now where they're functioning really well. Probably the key thing with how Armagh play at the moment is their flexibility or fluidity around positions and roles. Probably the best team in the country with that, even though because they've been away from Division 1 in the limelight, probably the general public wouldn't know Armagh that well at the moment, but they have 4 or 5 players that can play in a lot of key positions in the team and play there very, very well, and over the course of 70, 80 minutes do so in their competitive games. Aidan O'Rourke is probably the brilliant example of that. It's probably Armagh's best number 3, probably their best number 6. You could argue he's their best 11 and 14 as well. And against Monaghan at the weekend, he played all 4 of those roles at different stages in the game and did that really, really well. So that flexibility with players is probably the thing that Armagh have that most teams don't really have.
That's really interesting, because that allows a flexibility when you're having a game plan depending on the opposition, and it doesn't look like sometimes it looks like it's a weakness to alter your game plan for the opposition, but actually if you have players who can fit in anywhere, it's like, well, actually this is what we do, and so it gives confidence to the team.
Totally, and not to labour on the Aidan O'Rourke point, he's an exceptional footballer and very, very valuable to Armagh at the moment, but both O'Neills can play 9, 11, 14, Charlie Ogue can play 9, 11, 14, Soupy Campbell, the captain, can play 9, 11, 14, and they all interchange in those roles within minutes in the game, and that movement and flexibility is really important to how they play, because most defenders or players around the middle third who are given a job to tag a player, they're comfortable in a particular area of the field. They don't really like playing full back 1 minute, playing around the middle the next, back in a half back line, into the full forward line. That really upsets defenders or people who are trying to focus on a defensive job. So it does help them create space and create opportunities.
In terms of changes to last year, obviously they've taken Kieran Donaghy in as part of the backroom team. How did that go down amongst the Armagh football people?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's probably a novel coaching appointment in that I think someone said the brain drain has usually been in the other direction. There's a lot of Northern coaches have gone south and worked with teams to good effect in recent years. And Kieran Donaghy's a really interesting appointment because of his background. He's not a traditional GAA coach. He has that basketball knowledge that I know Geezer is really interested in bringing into their play. And I think everybody was pretty excited about what Star might bring. Kieran McKeever's also added to the backroom team, who obviously is a more traditional Armagh coach possibly. But the dynamic's pretty good with the backroom team, as long as they don't try to do too much too soon, I suppose, is probably the danger. But there's a lot of pretty shrewd people in the background there, so I'm sure they'll get it right.
It does seem as well, Aidan, that there's been an effort, maybe this comes with Donaghy coming in as well, that Armagh need to find a harder edge this year. Has that been the case, that maybe they haven't had that over the last couple of seasons?
I think that's a reasonable accusation to throw at them, and that certainly was highlighted after the Donaghy performance last year. Probably if there is an Achilles heel that needs to be examined, it's in games last year and the last few years, whenever they have a bad patch in a game, weren't really capable of battling down the hatches. So in a 7 or 8 minute period where one of the quality teams are under pressure, there's momentum against them, they might close things down and concede 2 or 3 points. Armagh had a habit of conceding 1-5 and 1-6 in those periods. They didn't really get dig in and make things difficult, get themselves a footing back in the game and push on from there. So that's something they'll be acutely aware of. That they'll know that when teams got a run on them last year, that they didn't stem the flow well enough. So that can come down to hard edge, can come down to cuteness, can down to just understanding on the pitch, and how to manage momentum. It's sometimes difficult to put your finger on all that, but it's a very important quality for teams that expect to compete for, let's say, provincial championships, as Armagh will want to do this year.
Did you see some of that on Sunday?
Yeah, not too bad. Signs were all good. Listen, when you win a game, you see all the positives, don't you? They had some really good football. Monaghan have some really bright young attacking talent, and they've a lot of them in the team at the moment. So it maybe suited Armagh. Armagh were maybe the more experienced and more physical, certainly in our defensive sector. And that probably showed up in the game, certainly in the early stages anyway. So it's hard to pass judgment on that one at the moment. It was a good start at the weekend. Monaghan, Armagh probably expected to have a look at each other. I think that's one we can definitely win as a starting point. So it was good to get that positive start, but I wouldn't be making grand decrees about progress or where we are yet based on that one result.
Sure. Do you think Jamie Clark's ever going to play for Armagh again?
It's really difficult to know. I'm not sure if Jamie knows whether he'll play for Armagh again. I don't think the door would ever be closed to Jamie. He has other priorities, as everybody else does, and I'm not sure he's even in the country at the moment. So I've no insight into the how dynamic of that within the camp. I'm sure everybody was disappointed, as the supporters are, that Jamie wasn't able to commit to the year. But Armagh have some really exciting forwards at the moment. Jamie would have been doing well to be starting this year if he was there. He's obviously very talented, but there's a lot of attacking talent in Armagh at a very similar level, probably around the level that Jamie's at the moment, and some of them are quite a bit younger than Jamie. So it's probably time to move on. Probably time to give the likes of Conor Turbett their opening and see where it takes them.
From the outside, it seems as if this is a management team and structure that's going to be there for the long haul, and that gives them some security in terms of trying stuff out and trying ideas. That's from the outside. I don't know, again, whether or not everybody in Armagh feels the same, but that's the sense I have.
Yeah, I mean, the building of this team has been, I think, years or 6 years. So, and there was a lot of frustration at the start because Kieran did the same thing in Kildare. it sounds very simple, but he built the foundations first. He spent a year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years building good habits and rewarding players that work hard, and it's not including players that thought they were bigger than the team, and just trying to inch forward and demonstrate that if you wanted to play for Armagh, these are the qualities that were required. And that meant for a couple of years that all the best players weren't playing for Armagh, but it also, over that period of time, built the picture that if you want to play, these are the terms of reference, these are the parameters. So now we're at the stage where all the best players are playing, that there's a queue behind each of the players, particularly in attack. There's a queue behind each of the players that they know that if the performance is out there, there's someone else going to come in. And that sort of very solid foundation has meant that they're in a position now to push on. There's no guarantees with anything, and certainly there are gaps in the team in terms of depth and what have you, particularly probably in defence. But Kieran has built such an understanding with the players and a trust now that, as you say, things like bringing in Kieran Donaghy or Kieran McKeever for something different, to see can they mix it up and come up with a better formula. The players will trust that and go with it immediately. There'll be no question. And I suppose we're probably at the stage now, because of constant, regular, progressive fans are probably trusting in all of that as well. So they're in a very decent place, but all of that has to be backed up with performances. That's the reality of where we're at. They're in Division 1. Armagh people expect to stay there and stay there for the duration, not just this year. And now they're at the stage where they expect to win Ulster Championships and push on. So all of that brings expectation and pressure, I suppose, but Kieran's no stranger to any of that.
I was going to say that there is obviously a tier, and no disrespect to Cavan, but over the last 4 or 5, maybe the last 10 years, there's been a tier which included Donegal and Tyrone and everybody else, and maybe Monaghan would sneak in and sneak out and sneak in and sneak out depending on what their form was like, but everybody else was striving to get there. How close are, in your view, Armagh to joining that top tier in Ulster at the moment?
Yeah, they're not there yet. I don't think anybody within the camp would claim that they are. Certainly an aspiration, and their eyes are very much focused on that. Donegal are the big nut that they have to crack. You know, they haven't been able psychologically to compete with Donegal yet, and that test is coming. There's a really interesting league game coming up very shortly. That'll be a good acid test for this Armagh team in terms of progress that they've made. And reality is, if they want to win a provincial championship, they're going to have to there's a couple of reasonable hurdles, I suppose, early on that they can pass, but a provincial final, if they get there, is going to include probably Donegal, but certainly Donegal or Tyrone, I would have thought. And that's really where they want to be. You know, if you want to be considered in those terms with those teams, you have to beat them, and we're not there yet. Bit of ground to go, and I'd say the players will be the first to hold their hand up and say we haven't competed with Donegal yet. Tyrone this weekend will be an interesting benchmark. Again, Tyrone are trying to find their feet, so it's an opportunity for our lads, but psychologically it will be a big game to take 2 points from.
Does not having Mickey Hart on the opposition sideline make it psychologically easier, or does it have little to no impact whatsoever?
I don't think the players think about that at all. I think they measure themselves against opponents individually and collective performance. I think they look at what they need to do to win games, and listen, obviously everybody knows who's on the sideline and for any particular team. I don't think the players put a whole pile of credence in that. Tyrone's new management are very, very capable and have a good track record in themselves, so I don't think Tyrone will be found wanting in that respect, but at this stage really comes down to the players.
One last one for me, in terms of how McGeeney liked to play. I remember when he was with Kildare talking about Olympic handball, and the wave motion in that sport was something that he was trying to get his team to replicate, and you could see it manifest itself over time. It's interesting that you said he's fascinated by basketball and bringing Donaghy in. Do you expect there to be significant changes in how the team plays, or will it be more kind of micro, the movement of the inside forwards and the role of whoever is the designated point guard from play to play?
Honestly, I don't think you're going to see significant change either in Armagh or anywhere else this year in terms of style of play. Please God, if Kieran Donaghy's there next year in the lead into a national league and championship campaigns, there'll be more time to try and build something more substantial. But in the short term, I would have thought he'll work more closely with individual forwards or clusters of forwards in terms of movement, their connectivity on the pitch, how they present, how they open space, and all that's extremely valuable, and not too far from the mind of anybody who's involved if they're playing or coaching basketball. Obviously, Kieran will have seen the impact that Jason Sherlock would have had in building Dublin's attacking pattern. So I imagine that's part of the thinking. And I know the players have really taken to the Star, value his input, and he's not behind the door and giving it. So all of that, adds to the cocktail of hopefully what they can do up front and creating something a wee bit different that might be the difference in those big games against the bigger teams.
One separate question, and I know we didn't get time to talk about this, but in terms of the third level and the role of third level in the GAA calendar at the moment, do you guys have any indication about what the future looks like and where Sigerson or even third level colleges might end up?
It's good that somebody's asking that question. I didn't think anybody was at all. It's nice. I think the split season is a real opportunity for third level. I think it creates a window early in the year if county players are not involved, and I think that's the direction that third level has to go. I think third level needs to step up and say, listen, if you're involved in county football, if you've made a county squad of whatever it is, 26 or 30, go with our blessing. Best of luck, our work is done here, and that Sigerson and Fitzgibbon should be seen as a nursery, a breeding ground for the next county players. So it should almost be the tier directly below. I'm not sure, there's a lot of self-interest involved. I'm not sure our sector will take that decision really, but if that did happen, you'd have a very nice window from November to potentially March, April, where you only have really good young exciting club players who are focused on third level. You could have a really impactful competition that is important to the county teams, because they're looking at their 5 or 6 players who are involved at top level and saying, right, are they going to be ready for us? Could we potentially bring them in when the Sigerson campaigns end? All that sounds really good and exciting to me as someone who's embedded in third level, but I'm not sure there is much hunger for that in our sector, unfortunately.
It sometimes feels, Aidan, as if the Sigerson is this sleeping giant that could, and the Fitzgibbon obviously as well, that so much more could be done with. Like, I don't know, is it maybe looking at how successful college sports are in the US, but like it should almost be more true over here given how star-studded a lot of these college teams are with inter-county players. And you look at some of the team sheets, like, and I know Paddy Andrews and Andy Moore were talking about it in their podcast last week, their DCU team was incredible, and they'd have like 30 people there watching them. It just doesn't make any sense that this isn't a bigger product in many ways.
Yeah, totally. One aspect of that is how universities and colleges sort of engage with their locality. Sometimes they're seen as sort of disconnected and, ivory tower in some way, and people around the campuses don't particularly engage with it. So I think more can be done to try and engender that collegiality. The GAA thing is a quandary at third level. I'm involved in the broader sport picture at Queen's, and we have a brilliant hockey program, rugby, soccer, rowing, and those sports provide brilliant platform for development for students. And the GAA just don't have it. We have just a couple of competitions crammed in, and it doesn't get the respect it deserves. It's not acknowledged for what it has done over the years in terms of player development, the investment in facilities. I mean, I don't know how many county teams in this country would be really struggling if colleges decided tomorrow, we're not going to bother with Gaelic games anymore and change their pitches to rugby and soccer pitches. GAA probably be in a lot of trouble. So I think it needs a revamp, certainly internally from the third level perspective, but I think the GAA needs to have a look at the importance of third level in the bigger picture as well.
It's not just player development, really. It's the development of the person who happens to be the player too.
Totally, and I would argue, and I would obviously you would say that, but I would say the focus on personal development that with students when they're at third level institutions is second to none. I think the understanding of the balance between academics and sport and where they are in their lives in terms of the challenges they face at that sort of 18 to 22 window. I think there's a lot of investment in those students as people, a lot of support there for them. I just think that's irreplaceable as a resource to our young people, particularly those who potentially can go on to the very top of their sport. But I'm not sure there's a big appreciation for that outside of our sector.
Just one more kind of, again, changing subject again, Aidan. It just kind of occurred to me, obviously, that Armagh against Tyrone this weekend is going to be the only clash between two Northern Ireland teams in essentially in this year's National League. Would you like to see, I guess, with the vaccine programme in the north, I guess a more accelerated move towards getting crowds at those sort of games? I know this weekend is obviously going to be too soon, but in the case of an Ulster Championship clash between the two teams, is that something you'd like to see?
Completely. I mean, other sports have already moved there. There's going to be, I think it's 1,000 at the cup final this weekend. I mean, like everything else, like all of the stages of return to normality here, the GAA have to make their own decisions on this because other sports and government are ahead of them on this. So we just need to get our house in order. This can be done safely, and as far as I'm concerned, it should be done. Just on a practical level, our club had an underage county final. Big shout out to the under 13s, but we had a county final at the weekend, and the drama of, you know, can one parent go? You know, can two parents go? Will a car get in? You know, it just really took away from what should have been a really special time for young kids in a club. But you think of the impact of county football or hurling on communities nationwide here, and the opportunity to allow people to go back to games, of what the lift that could give some people. I think we should be grasping that with both hands. You know, if the opportunity's there, if it's safe, if it fits with public health guidance, GAA need to be stepping forward and making it happen.
Aidan, great stuff. Always brilliant to have you on. Thanks a million. That was great.
Thanks, lads.
Aidan O'Rourke there, giving us some pretty interesting insights into the Armagh situation. And look, I'm fascinated by that whole third level. I totally agree with you. That was the one thing that struck me from listening to, well, one of the many things that struck me from listening to Paddy Andrews and Andy Moran's podcast, where the players really remember the Sigerson matches or the Sigerson League matches, and like the evolution of Paddy Andrews as a player who's getting torn apart by Andy Moran as a defender, and then coming into Niall Moylan and saying, I told you I wasn't a fullback, and then kicking a few points in the second half. Like, you know, it gives him the confidence to go on. I presume have a similar conversation with Pat Gilroy at some point, or maybe it wasn't Pat Gilroy, got dropped, didn't he? They haven't got into the details of how he makes his way back onto the panel. But like the teams, the star-studded teams, with 15 inter-county players, a completely different proposition there from Aidan O'Rourke, which I'd never heard anybody in third level say, actually we can be that tier below inter-county and not be focused on just having 5 or 6 superstars in our team.
Yeah, it is. Like, I do think, from what we've seen, though, over the last couple of years, what there has been are star-studded teams that just haven't managed to garner the attention. But maybe the way he's looking at it, it's something that it's a little bit more sustainable, to say the least. But there's always these amazing storylines, even when it comes to the Sigerson. Like a lot of those teams in Dublin who've got a great link up with the county board, obviously, in DCU and UCD, and even DIT when they got to the final. But then there's also like the case of Billy Morgan managing a lot of Kerry lads to win a Sigerson a couple of years ago, and there's all these little threads. They're outstanding teams, brilliant football that always happens.
Yeah, there was somebody, I can't remember who, did a story about how the Kerry game at the weekend was going to be huge for Pádraig Joyce because he had spent time in Tralee and had seen, that Kerry team, that Tralee team have been great, but was there when the Kerry team would have been, I guess there was several Tralee players. Seamus Moylan went to Tralee, didn't he?
Yeah.
And so he won a Sigerson with them, and he was obviously an All-Ireland winner then when Joyce was in college that year, and then the next year went on to win an All-Ireland. So there's a million of those. If the history of the Sigerson and the Fitzgibbon would be sensational, and maybe then we would begin to appreciate just how good the competition has been in the past. So look, I don't know, there's that point as well, like very interesting that there's somebody in the midst of it going, we're not great at engaging with local communities. Like, you know, if you think about within a 5-mile radius of DCU, you've got Whitehall, Columkills, Nafina, Ballymun, Vincent's, Clontarf, Scully Connell, like 5 senior clubs, 3 of whom have won All Irelands. Maybe Na Fianna haven't, have they? No, they haven't. Within like the hinterland of that, and I wouldn't say that many supporters from those clubs end up being DCU supporters. It's not. There's no kind of link to the local community, even though that DCU team would have played some of the best football that we might have seen from a group of 20 to 22-year-olds.
And based on a lot of players from a lot of those clubs that you mentioned there as well. So like the footballing links seem to be there, but whether or not the community links and actually supporting your team is there, like it's always a complex issue. How do you define what do you care about and what do you not care about? Like, I mean, we had this conversation a little while ago when it came to the Railway Cup, for example. Like, how did something that seemed so important get so insignificant so quickly? Like, is it down to the calendar? Or is it down to the championship, to the league getting better? Like, there's probably like a finite amount of passion people can feel for one sport.
Well, if there's no window for it, if there's a window for stuff, like Friday night is high school, Saturday is college, Sunday is NFL, and everybody goes, this is my window, tonight I'm interested in this, and like then at least it's very clear. At the moment, there's just been this bleh, and it's let's get the fixtures, jam them in. So the split season and what comes with the split season is a land of opportunity. So we'll wait and see.